Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, we ask that you kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices or place them on silent. Thank you.
We learn in the book of Psalms. As a mother has compassion for her children, so may Adonai our God have compassion for all the family and friends of Rosalind Rachlin who we come here to remember today. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are dust. Our days are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. But we trust that Adonai's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children endures age after age, unchanging. We begin our service today by reciting Psalms, thus linking Roz's life to our ancient tradition, to the Jewish people, and to the eternity of God.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bidot asher bitzeni, al menuchot yenaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech Begets al mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha, umishantecha, Shivtecha umishantecha, hema yinachamoni, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, neged zorerai, dishantav Hashemen roshi, dishantav Hashemen roshi, dishantav Hashemen roshi, kol sirevaya, ach tov chesed, yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, Veshavti beveit Adonai, Veshavti beveit Adonai, leorech yamim, yairai, yairai,
Those were the Hebrew words of Psalm 23, also known as the Shepherd's Psalm, a psalm that we turn to for words of comfort during difficult moments such as this one. I'll ask that you join me in the English of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
It is at the very beginning of Torah that we learn that when a loved one passes away, members of the family come forward to share stories and memories. And it's this ancient tradition that will continue here today as we remember Roz, first calling upon her children, Sharon and then Stuart. Then we'll hear from two of her grandchildren, Mara and then Michael. Sharon.
Good morning. My mother was an extraordinary woman. Her life was filled with joy and gratitude and lots of love. She had an incredible resilience. She lived each day with a positive attitude and met the challenges she faced with courage and determination. She saw each day as a gift and was happy to be given it. My mother was a very wise woman. She knew what was important and focused on those things. Family was always of greatest importance to her. She loved my brother and me and was always so proud of us, and that love carried over to our spouses as well. She adored her grandchildren. They were such a blessing in her life, and she cherished the relationship that she had with them. As for her great-grandchildren, that joy was beyond measure. When they called her GB, Great Bubby, it filled her with joy. Her love of family and friends extended beyond her immediate family. She loved when nieces and nephews called, and she got great pleasure from sending birthday and anniversary cards to all of her family members and friends. My mother's wisdom was reflected in the many lessons she taught us and how she lived her life. She had so many favorite sayings that she shared with us. Take one day at a time. Be grateful for what you have. If you can't fix it, don't dwell on it. Everyone is different. Accept them as they are. And of course, the one many of you have heard her say, adjust, adapt, and accept. This expression really exemplified her life. Over the years, my mother was faced with many challenges, and she conquered these challenges by accepting what life brought her way. My parents met before my father enlisted in the Navy and was shipped overseas. They corresponded during the war and dated when he returned, marrying in October 1947. My mother moved from Trenton, New Jersey, into my grandmother's 3-bedroom house in South Philadelphia, where my grandmother, a single aunt, and my father's twin brother already lived. My grandmother gave my parents her bedroom, and she moved into the tiny back bedroom with my aunt. My parents lived in this house for 4.5 years, until I was 3.5 and my brother was 6 months old, all of us sharing this one bedroom. My mother not only accepted this situation, but actually spoke very fondly of the years she lived there. She became close with her mother-in-law, a warm relationship that lasted until my grandmother died in 1966. During this time, with my mother's encouragement, my father went back to school on the GI Bill. He attended Drexel University, where he earned a degree in mechanical engineering, attending college 3 nights a week, while working all day at the Naval Shipyard from 1950 to 1958. He could not have done this without my mother's help. She was very proud of my father's accomplishment. She was also very proud of her accomplishment when she received a PhD award, pushing hubby through. No one could have predicted that just 10 years later, at the age of 48, my father would die of a brain tumor. My mother was just 47 years old. It was a very challenging time for her, but she picked up the pieces and went on. She returned to work and learned to drive a car. And when the following summer my brother worked at a sleepaway camp and I traveled through Europe following my college graduation, my mother took off from work to go to California for 3 weeks to visit to her family, staying with my Uncle Sam and Aunt Faye. It was exactly what she needed, and these visits continued every February for years. I know it was not easy being alone those years, but she always stayed upbeat and positive. And then in 1974, my mother's hairdresser introduced her to a wonderful man who she married in February 1976. He was not only wonderful to my mom, but became an important part of our family as well. Unfortunately, this marriage was again cut short by illness, and in July 1985, Gerhard passed away. And again, I watched my mother pick up the pieces and go on. She had already stopped working and was traveling regularly from Philadelphia to Cherry Hill to spend time with us and help with the children when I was working. When I suggested that she move to Cherry Hill, she was not opposed to the idea. That was over 28 years ago. She joined TBS, and when an ad appeared in Temple Talk looking for people to work at the preschool lunch program, she took the job. She loved working with the children and made friends while working there. She continued to do this until it became too difficult. And rather than let her go, Ellen Bourgeois offered her a position as the challah bubby. She loved going into TBS on Friday mornings and baking the challah the children had made. And she loved when the children called her Bubby Roz. She also volunteered in the gift shop and later joined a Mahjong group. Her life was full and rewarding. Then in 2004, she suffered from a difficult illness. While visiting her family in California, she lost the mobility of her legs. She spent 1 month in the Tarzana Hospital while physicians tried to determine the root of the problem, and she regained her strength. We were finally able to bring her home, weak and tired, but determined. She had Michael's college graduation coming up, and she was determined to go, even if it meant going in a wheelchair. The biggest challenge of her life, however, occurred on Rosh Hashanah 2014, when she was rushed to the hospital and she required emergency surgery, which resulted in an ostomy. She accepted this change with dignity and grace and adjusted to her new way of life. She learned to care for her ostomy on her own, and she did this until she was 100, when her arthritic hands needed more assistance. Over the past 2.5 years, she has adapted and accepted all the changes in her life, grateful to be alive. As she got out less, she read more. She loved discussing books with those who came to visit and enjoyed watching TV game shows. She was grateful for every day. At night when she went to bed, she prayed for the well-being of her family, thanked God for giving her another day, and asked God, please, to give her one more. There have been so many caring people in my mother's life, and she appreciated them all, loving relatives, caring friends and neighbors, her wonderful driver who she called her adopted son, and caregivers who spent time with her and grew to love her. They made her life richer, and she appreciated that gift. She made friends wherever she went, at TBS, her hairdresser, even the makeup lady at the Clinique counter in the mall. All of these people loved her and cherished their friendship with her. But her family has always meant more to her than anything in the world, and we have all been so fortunate to be the recipients of that love. Pirkei Avot teaches us that one who is happy with his lot is truly rich. My mother has always measured her good fortune by the love and devotion she had in her love. She was truly a rich person. I have been so fortunate to have had these years to spend with my mother. She's given me so much. Thank you, Mom, for the example you have been for me in living your life. I am proud to be your daughter. I will miss you and always love you.
Thank you, Sharon. And we call upon Stuart.
I have to start off by just saying that since arriving here this morning, I think I've acquired a new name. I think I'm now officially Sharon's brother. You know, my mother was a remarkable woman, and many of you have only known her for the time that she moved to Cherry Hill. I was fortunate in knowing her for over 70 years, and very privileged to be so. I'm not going to repeat everything that my sister said, but she very much evolved over time. She really started out as what you would call a 50s housewife and morphed into the matriarch of a family that she wasn't born into, but married into, and very much was a grande dame and matriarch. What I can add to the story that my sister told you is how she affected my life and my life in earlier times. And so I'll give you a few stories just to illustrate this. When I was probably 10 or 11 years old, we had made a decision, two of us, another child, to have a fight after school. So I probably foolishly told my mother this, and she immediately rushed out with me to where the fight was. But she didn't rush out there to stop the fight. She rushed out there to say, let them fight, but nobody else interfere. So at the same time, she was able to show me that I needed to fight my own battles, but battles needed to be fair. As you heard, my father died when I was 16 years old. And at that point in my life, my life revolved around my father. And I was devastated. And here was a woman who was 47 years old, who had lost the love of her life, who had to spend time taking care of her 16-year-old son and working him through all of his difficulty with his father dying. My sister was home during the summer and then went back to school, and we had a year in which I was a senior in school in which we bonded for the entire year, and I think we mostly bonded over the fish fry at Howard Johnson's, where we went to frequently. As you heard, she had to learn to drive. She did not know how to drive. I did know how to drive, and I tried to teach her, which failed miserably. My cousin tried to teach her, which failed miserably. And finally, she got someone from the outside. And we knew that she needed to get someone else to help her, because as we turned on Marley Road one day when she was driving, we kind of hopped the curb and almost said hello to a tree that was sitting there. So as you think about it, not only shouldn't parents teach children to drive, but children shouldn't teach parents to drive. After the year last year in high school, I went to college in the early 70s. And as is such, you get a little rebellion streak when you go to school. And one of my rebellion was mild. All I did was grow my hair to an absurd length and my beard to be very long. And she detested it, but she never said anything. And she went as far not to say anything that when other family members criticized me, she stood up for me. I think she had the sense to know that it was just another phase and it would go away. But she was always logical and always understood how to deal with these situations. After college, I stayed home for 3 years, and Sharon was already or had gotten married, and I spent time with her before she got married to Gerhardt. And as I was leaving for graduate school, one of the things that I did not know how to do was cook. And my mother was a very good cook. But I'll say she was a little bit of an inventive cook. When I tried to get recipes from her, she said, you put a little of this in, you stir it until it feels right. Well, we sat there day after day with her recipes in measuring out what a pinch was, how long I had to stir it. I think I drove her crazy while I was getting to leave, but she did teach me how to cook so that I at least could survive for a little while. So when you look at her, you have to think of just how practical she was and how logical she was and how she put everything together, and all the life's lessons that early on that I learned from her that I hope that I continue to use. So just in finalizing everything, I cannot tell you how much that I will miss her and how much that I loved her. Thank you.
Mara.
Roz, Aunt Roz, Bubby, and GB are just some of the names this special woman answered to. When I look around this room, I am not at all surprised to see it filled with people wanting to celebrate the amazing life my Bubby lived. My Bubby did not have an easy life. As you heard, she lost 2 husbands for the age of 70, had to raise 2 teens on her own, which is no easy feat, has outlived all of her siblings and friends, and has dealt with and overcome 2 serious illnesses. But through all of it, she has had the best attitude of anyone I have ever met, which I so believe has enabled her to rise above all of these tragedies and focus on the good in her life and live the long life she has. My Bubby was a believer. She thanked God every day for everything she had and was grateful, saying she had a lot to be thankful for and that nothing is guaranteed in life. Having gone through what she did in her life made her realize how precious each day is. My Bubby had a saying, as my mom shared with you, which is adjust, adapt, accept, and she truly lived by these 3 words. This was her mantra. She felt that if she could accept the situation, then she was able to deal with it and solve it. That's what she believed, and that is how she lived her life. And that helped her through so much and helped to keep her positive. She would tell me that nothing is easy in life, but you just have to be grateful for every day, and she truly was. My Bubby would often tell me that it's very important to accept a situation because once you do, then you can move forward. She would say these 3 words to herself all the time because she said she learned that it really helped her with everything she encountered. Saying those 3 words, she said, helped her get to where she was, and she told me once that she wouldn't have lived as long as she did without those 3 words guiding her along with her belief in God. She would pray every night and say a prayer for all of her children, grandchildren, and great-children each night before going to sleep. My Bubby was an optimistic person and looked on the bright side of things. She didn't hold grudges or judge others. She would say to me, everyone is different and everyone looks at things differently and everyone handles things differently. If you are able to look at the bright side of things, then you are able to see everything that is good. When I would call her and ask her how her day was, she would say, "Mara, I'm not lighting the world on fire." But I would always correct her and remind her how truly amazing she was. At 102 years old, she was still living at home, solving the Wheel of Fortune puzzles before the contestants, and reading one of the many books on her nightstand every night before bed. Even when I visited her just this past Sunday, she had tuna casserole in her freezer waiting for me to take home to Danny because she knows that is Danny's favorite. My Bubby had a way about her that caused others to love her. From all of her family, near and far, to her driver, Arnie, who she adored, to her aides Althea, Carly, Nicole, and Brandy, who she counted on each and every day in the last year and felt so very lucky to have, to many of my mom's friends who she loved as well. But the person who she loved and admired the most was my mom. She would often say to me, "I don't know how your mother does it all and also takes care of me." She was so very grateful for my mom and so extremely proud of her. Many people here were the lucky recipients of my Bubby's birthday cards. She got such pleasure in remembering people's birthdays. She had a little book with everyone's birthdays in it, and she would look each month to see whose birthdays were that month and then go to the card store to get cards for the entire month. When she could no longer do this, she would make my mom send cards to everyone for her. My Bubby was also a caller and loved talking to people on the phone. And if she hadn't heard from you in a while, you could expect a phone call from her to check in on you. She called my Aunt Bee and Josh out in California every Friday night to wish them a good Shabbos and to see how their week was. I remember her telling me one week that Josh called her before she got to call him, and she was so thrilled because he thought to call her. She never expected anything in return, but when other people remembered her birthday or called her, it would make her day. My Bubby's favorite place to travel was to California every year for a couple of weeks to visit her brothers and their families who lived out there. Family was the most important to my Bubby, more than anything else, and she was always so happy to do things and go places with her family. I will never forget how we convinced her to go on Space Mountain in Disney with me, Michael, and Melissa when she was 70 years old. She was always up for anything when it came to her family. For as long as she could, my Bubby also played mahjong, and she would tell me each week how thankful she was that the group of women included her and made her feel welcome. And every week she got her nails done and her hair set, even pushing herself to get her hair done just this past Thursday. My Bubby adored her great-grandchildren, Jake, Danny, Jagger, Lila, and Dana, and they adored her as well. Even when she was tired at the end of the day, when one of them called her, her face would light up with joy. I asked her once what advice she would give to her great-grandchildren as they grow up and get older. And I will end with what she said because I think it's good advice for everyone. She said, "You have to be happy with what you've got. You can't look at other people. You can't make comparisons. You have to be content with what the good Lord gives you." That's the way I look at it. I have never looked at others and what they had. I was always grateful for what I had, and I still am. I know there are friends that had more money, but I was happy for them. I don't compare what I have to what they have because I feel like I have more than they do. I am blessed with wonderful children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. What more could you ask for? It is no coincidence that my Bubby passed away on December 18th. In Judaism, we believe that the number 18 in Hebrew is chai, which translates to life in English. There is no one who loved life and lived life to the fullest to the very end like my Bubby. We love you, Bubby.
And finally, Michael.
I have my tissues ready just in case. My Bubby. I'll be honest, I don't know how to begin this. Like many of you, I thought that my Bubby would live forever. I've been dreading this moment, hoping it just wouldn't happen. And now that we're here, it doesn't feel quite real. Like my bubby and I will have another moment of seeing each other or watching game shows together or talking to each other on the phone or just saying I love you one more time. My bubby was someone who was a constant person in my life ever since I was born. During the course of my bubby's life, she taught me and many of us so many invaluable lessons through her actions and the stories she shared. As I share them now, I hope I can do justice to what my bubby taught me and how these lessons showed up through my bubby being the incredible person that she was. One lesson I learned from my bubby was to always remember the importance of family. Ever since I can remember, my bubby shared so many stories with us about our family history. Stories about how her mother emigrated from Belarus to America and how she came over with 3 children, yet had to send one back since he was not allowed in America because he had a disease of the eyes. Stories about how her brother Sam was a prisoner of war and the moment she and her family were reunited with him. Stories about how my bubby met her husband Matti, my grandfather, when visiting her cousin in Philadelphia, and soon finding out that her cousin was setting her up on a blind date. Stories about when my grandfather unfortunately passed away, and how she was later met her second husband, Gerhard, my Zadie, through her hairdresser. My bubby always ensured that we knew our history and where we came from, and I would soak up every opportunity to hear those stories again and again. In addition to that, my bubby never missed a family occasion. She attended every July 4th family picnic, every bar and bat mitzvah and wedding, and every graduation. And she loved her family so deeply. She made sure to call loved ones, including her Friday night Shabbat calls to her brothers, and she decorated her house with tons of pictures. Her grandkids were the apple of her eye, and her great-grandkids were her doll babies, and their pictures all faced where she sat on her sofa so she could always adore their beautiful faces. Another lesson I learned from my bubby was it is important to continue our traditions. One way in which my bubby continued our traditions was through cooking and baking. Most of us have experienced my bubby's cooking at some point, whether it be her matzo ball soup or her latkes for both Hanukkah and Passover. And of course, her famous baking, her mandel bread, hamantashen, and her delicious apple cake. Her apple cake was so well known that she would not just make it for our family, but also for her beauticians and her clinique lady at the mall. And she always believed in continuing the Jewish traditions of celebrating the holidays and of infusing our home with Yiddish phrases, including her blessing to us if anyone sneezed by saying, "Se gesund, se leben, se lang giel, se gwachsen, se gefällen to the chuppah stellen." My bubby also taught me the lesson that life is to be enjoyed. My bubby loved life and wanted to be here as long as possible. And during her time, she did things on her terms. She strived to be independent, driving up until she was 91, and even making her own meals up until she was 101. She treated herself to the snacks she liked, like Reese's peanut butter cups, Godiva chocolate, peanut butter M&Ms, Cheetos, and jelly donuts. And the best part was that we each got to enjoy life with her. I look back fondly at moments we had together, going out to many dinners together, having a chocolate ice cream popsicle together, watching movies together, going to Disney World as a family together, like my sister mentioned, and my bubby somehow going on Space Mountain. And I think that was the last time my bubby rode a roller coaster. And always, always dancing together at every family function. Another lesson that my bubby taught all of us was to have your wits about you. She exemplified this as she seemed to get more knowledgeable and wiser with age. From the time I was little, I can remember my bubby loving game shows, especially Wheel of Fortune. We had often joked that we should go on Wheel of Fortune together as a grandmother-grandson duo. She continued to find joy in watching game shows as she got older, and towards the last 5 years of her life, you could always find the Game Show Network playing in her home. Two of her favorites that we watched together on the weekend were America Says and Chain Reaction. Even this past Saturday when I visited her, she was still solving these word problems correctly and often before the contestants would. And as she got older, she became more and more of an avid reader. My bubby would do circles around me with the amount of books she read. I loved hearing about every book. about the characters, the information she learned, and the incredible amount of detail she could remember about the books well after she had finished them. My bubby also taught me the important lesson to be strong, have resilience, and let nothing stop you. No matter what challenges my bubby faced, and unfortunately she had her fair share throughout her life, she always persevered and made sure to be there for her loved ones. I remember being a senior in college and getting word that my bubby's recent trip to California was being extended because she had to go to the hospital due to a health concern. Despite my bubby facing this obstacle and us not knowing what would be, she still ensured that she made it back in time for my college graduation on the East Coast, even if that meant being in a wheelchair. She is, in fact, the epitome of resilience, someone who lost 2 husbands, lost multiple siblings, and faced various health challenges, yet still stayed strong and looked at the positive side of life. Her attitude is one I've always admired and something I aspire to every day. There are so many other lessons I could share with you. Take one day at a time, there's no answer to a why, do not dwell on the past, and age is just a number. But there are 2 more important lessons that I'd like to share. This past week, I was going through pictures of my bubby and me, and I came across a video of my family and I singing happy birthday to her on her 94th birthday. After singing, I asked my bubby, "What's the best advice you can give us?" She thought about it for a second and then said the following: "Be a good person, be kind, be patient, be understanding. You know, life is short." As I think now back over my bubby's life and what she has meant to so many of us, I can say that she truly did follow this advice. My bubby was a beautiful person with a beautiful soul. She loved being with kids and was known as Bubby Roz at TBS and helped the preschoolers bake challah. She volunteered all through her 90s and received an award at the age of 96 at the synagogue for her service to the community. And her kindness and love knew no bounds. Every time I left her home, she always walked to the door, even with her rollator, so she could see that I got off safely. She called her kids and grandkids, remembered everyone's birthday and anniversary, and kept in touch with her family. The last lesson I want to share is something my bubby continuously shared with so many of us. You have to be grateful for what you've got. Well, my bubby, I am so grateful for you. I'm grateful for the peanut butter jelly sandwiches you made when I got home from kindergarten. I'm grateful for the laughs we shared while watching the Golden Girls and the afternoon watchings of your soaps like General Hospital after I got home from high school. I'm grateful for the many gifts you brought me and your grandkids, but giving us the most important gift of all, your unconditional and never-ending love. I'm grateful for your Afghans that kept me warm on cold nights, for allowing me to borrow VHS tapes from Bubby's Blockbuster, for subscribing me to Entertainment Weekly, which infused a deeper love of movies, and for hoping that these magazine subscriptions would help you win Publishers Clearinghouse, for recommending books, for always being optimistic, for always loving my piano playing and clapping at the end of each song, for our weekly video chats on the GrandPad that helped me get through the pandemic and that brought so much joy to my day, for seeing the goodness in me, for always believing in me, and for teaching me so many important lessons that have guided my life and will continue to do so. Even though I know none of us can live forever, I always thought that my bubby would. I'm grateful that my bubby is at peace, as I know that is the most important thing. But I'll be honest, I just don't know my life without my bubby. And it feels like a piece of my heart is missing. No matter what was happening in my life nor in the world, I felt a sense of peace and calmness in my bubby's presence, like everything was just right. A feeling of safety and serenity that only a bubby can provide. Being with her and hearing her voice just made everything okay. I know that I will have to adjust, adapt, and accept, as we've heard, but this lesson will be a challenging one to follow, as I'm not ready to accept my bubby's loss. My bubby once said to me, "Always remember that your bubby thinks the world of you." Well, my bubby, Your Michael thinks the world of you and loves you so very much.
Wow. Thank you to Sharon and Stuart, Mara, and Michael, which of course I heard Roz many times call you my Michael. And clearly, she had a special relationship with so many people, and of course everyone in her family, and I know you articulating your special relationship with her is particularly beautiful today. As I reflected on our conversation yesterday and on the years that I knew Roz, it's funny, there are a number of lessons from Torah that jumped to my mind. One that Sharon quoted from Pirkei Avot about being samech b'chalko, being happy with your lot, because Roz certainly was that. Even with all the challenges she faced, she was someone who had a deep contentment and found so much joy in her family and her community. But I also thought about what we're reading in Shul on Shabbat, which is the book of Bereshit, and we're approaching the very end of the book of Torah, which we'll read next week in a Torah portion called Vayechi, which means, and he lived. And its subject is our patriarch Jacob, who passes away in that final portion. And it seems ironic that the Torah opens a portion about Jacob's passing with a reference to how he lived, but I think there is something there to teach us today as we remember Roz. First of all, though Roz didn't quite make it to Jacob's 147 years, she got closer than most, being blessed with 102 years of life. And also like Jacob, Roz was blessed with a wonderful family. She was blessed by her children, Sharon and Ben, and Stuart and Sharon, and her grandchildren, Mara and Jason, and Michael, Melissa and Michael, Rachel and Matthew and Miriam, and that tremendous blessing of her great-grandchildren, 5 of them, Jake, Danny, Jagger, Lila, and Dana. Along with her 2 partners, she shared her life with Mati and Gerhard, Zichronam Livracha, blessed memory, as well as her brothers, nieces, and nephews, and dear friends. And so as we gather together at this sad moment, we're comforted by our memories of Roz and the many lessons that she taught us by how she lived. Vayechi. Roz was born in Woodridge, California in the Catskills while her parents were visiting family there over Pesach, but she grew up in Trenton. And she was the second youngest of Louis and Freda and grew up with her brothers Honey, Murray, Morris, Samuel, and Nathan, all of blessed memory. And after she graduated high school, she worked as a clerk typist at Fort Dix. Now, we know that was around this time that Roz met Mati, and Sharon spoke about that story of how they met, being set up through her cousin Faggy. And also, she spoke of how she and Stuart grew up in South Philly and then the Northeast as well. And we know about Roz's tragedy of the loss of Mati, and for Sharon and Stuart too, when they were young. Through all of this, as we heard, Roz continued to follow her own advice, to adjust, adapt, and accept. And one way she did this, or had to do this, was through going back to work at a temp agency. And one of the many jobs that she had that stood out, as we spoke about yesterday, was a job she had as a secretary at Hahnemann Hospital, which is notable because it was there that she was able to get Stuart white mice for pets. Eventually, though, she returned to work as a clerk typist for the government, getting a job with the Navy in Philadelphia. But as time moved on and Roz's family began to expand, she found so much joy in that. Sharon met Ben, and Stuart met his own Sharon. And it was actually Roz who inadvertently helped make that match. Sharon's parents and Roz had mutual friends, which led to an impromptu meeting between Roz and Sharon years before, where Sharon, you told me you weren't exactly at your best at that meeting. You can ask her more about that later if you'd like. And a few years after that, Roz brought Sharon's parents freshly baked bread from Gerhardt, who she was with at that point, to send to Stuart at college, because Sharon and Stuart were in college together. And it was actually through the delivery of that bread, which almost didn't happen, but eventually did, that Sharon and Stuart met each other. As Jacob's family grew, and as Roz's family grew, she became the matriarch of this wonderful clan. And Roz welcomed each new member in with open arms, making sure that they knew that they were loved as if they were her own, because she made them her own children, her own grandchildren. They were all a part of her family. And speaking of grandchildren, as we heard from Mara and Michael, Roz was a beloved bubby, and she loved spending time with all of her grandchildren. I got to see flashes of this, of her dancing at Melissa and Michael's wedding, and Jagger and her joy at Jagger's bris, and other family simchas that we got to celebrate over the years. She brought so much joy into the room and got so much joy from all of you, and of course, particularly as a GB, a great bubby to her 5 great-grandchildren. Roz was so proud of her family, which is at the center of her life, and was so central in all of your lives. The love and devotion that all of you gave to Roz throughout her life brought her joy, and I know brought you joy. Truly, vayechi. And I really got to know Roz through the TBS community on Shabbos morning when she would come with Sharon and Ben. And of course, working at the gift shop where usually I'd see her sitting at the counter reading a book. Business wasn't so great back then. But she was always happy to be interrupted and to chat, which is also something she did too when she was the challah bubby at TBS. And to a whole generation of our ECEC students, she will always be known as Bubby Roz. And we knew on Friday when we could smell the challah that was baking, she was there and she had so much joy in that. And it wasn't only baking the challah with the children. After she finished baking, she would come into the main office, have a seat on her walker, and kind of hold court. She'd sit and speak to us and the other members of the staff, really anyone who would walk through, and chat and schmooze until her ride came and she went back home. And of course, as Michael mentioned, she was given a service award for all of her efforts and wonderful things she did at TBS in 2017 at the age of 96. I think the oldest service award recipient that we have ever had. Vayechi. In addition to her family, Roz enriched the lives of so many in our community. We heard about the many lessons that Roz leaves everyone with. Adjust, adapt, accept, always be grateful, a positive outlook on life. Melissa also in our conversation added that you loved how you could talk to your bubby about anything, like the time when you saw your first rated R movie at a neighbor's house when you were in 2nd grade. Seems like those neighbors are here. And when you got home from that experience, you knew the only person you could tell was your bubby. Because she would accept, adjust, adapt, and accept. And of course, there's the prayer that she said every morning, a prayer that resonates for all of us today. Thank you, dear God, for today. Please give me another one. Roz was granted many days, but still, it doesn't seem like enough, as her love was something that knew no bounds and came rippling through so many places in our community. We are grateful for the many days that Roz had with us and the many memories and lessons that she leaves for us. And what all of this tells us is that Roz understood this lesson of Vayechi. She lived with love for her community and her tradition, and most of all, for all of you, her family. And this is the legacy that she leaves. You know, there's a commentary that explains why a Torah portion about Jacob's death opens with a word about his life. It says that a person's good deeds live on and become the inheritance of all those who knew her. That's the meaning of Vayechi. And now Roz's many good deeds are a part of your inheritance. And that's how we know she'll be a part of your lives and a blessing for all of our lives, for all of the days and the years to come. We rise for a final prayer.
El male rachamim shochein b'amromim hamseh menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina b'malot kedoshim utzarim כזוהר הרקיע מסעירים את נשמת רחל לבשה בת חיים אריה ופרידה שלחה לעולמה בגן עדן תהי מנוחתה אנה בת הרחמים הסתיריה בסתר כנפך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Rosalind Rachlin, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. You may be seated.
From here, we'll head to Montefiore Cemetery in Jenkintown for the burial. After that, the family will be sitting Shiva at Sharon and Ben's home, 1813 Rolling Lane in Cherry Hill. We'll be welcoming comforters this afternoon and afternoons throughout Shiva, and there'll be Shiva Minyanim tonight, Sunday night, Monday, and Tuesday evenings, all at 7:30 p.m.
A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time for planting and a time for uprooting, a time for hurting and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up. A time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for crying and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering, a time for embracing and a time for refraining. A time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for letting go, a time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for speaking and a time